All right, so we'll get started, and those who come a little bit later, don't worry, we will be recording this and posting it on Sky and Telescope's YouTube channel. I would like to introduce myself. I'm Kelly Beatty. I'm the senior editor of Sky and Telescope. I've been on the staff for 45 years or so. I actually retired 4 years ago, but I continue to be deeply involved in the tours that Sky and Telescope puts together. And I'm joined today by John and Rita Royal of Royal Adventures, the husband-wife team who have for decades provided very high-quality educational tours to all parts of the world, but especially here in Central America, well, in Mexico, because Rita was raised in El Salvador and knows this area very well. Latin America is one of their specialties. Also, we're joined by Alfonso Escobedo, who is the owner of Ecoturismo Yucatan, which is the ground operator that will be guiding us through our many amazing sites on the Yucatan Peninsula. And also, finally, Gabrielle Vale, Dr. Gabrielle Vale, who is a adjunct professor at the University of North Carolina and an expert in the Maya codices, their written records, and especially the astronomy that the Maya learned on their own and became very sophisticated at. So I want to let everybody know, again, this is being recorded. And if you have questions, feel free. If you're familiar with Zoom, you'll know that down at the bottom there is a icon for Q&A. If you pop that open, you can type in a question, and I'll keep an eye out for it during the presentation. But if not, otherwise we'll take a couple of breaks so that we can get some of those questions answered. And so without further ado, I'm going to ask John and Rita maybe to give us a little introduction while I get the PowerPoint going here.
Okay. Well, we all inviting you to join Sky and Telescope and their wonderful educational programs to the Yucatan for an introduction of the colors and the culture and the amazing archaeology of this part of Mexico. So we start in Cancun. That's where we fly in. And then is going to be our jumping point to the discovery of all the many treasures in the Yucatan. Yes. But this, of course, is all made even better because you're going to witness an annular eclipse, not only in these wonderful areas, but in the area of Campeche, at a historical hacienda, which is our base to view the annular eclipse. So you fly into Cancun, and from there we travel to the area of Chichen Itza. But before that, we're going to explore Coba, that has one of the highest pyramid in the peninsula, and we're going to visit Chichen Itza, but not only we'll visit Chichen Itza, but we'll visit before it's open to the public, which it makes a big difference. Alfonso, I would like you to just comment a little bit about the significance of Chichen Itza in terms of astronomy aspects of the site.
Oh, yes.
Oops.
Sorry, Alfonso, we cannot hear you.
Oh, yeah, I turned off my microphone. Yes, Chichen Itza is one of the most late, same as Uxmal, they are more or less contemporaneous, is a late post-classic site. And basically, it contains a combination of influence from the highlands of Mexico and the Maya architecture. And it's a beautiful combination. So you see iconography from the highlands, as well as iconography and hieroglyphic writing in a part of Chichen Itza. So one of the most important buildings is the Kukulkan Pyramid, and second to that is the observatory, which is supposed to be an observatory. There are alignments that coincide with the openings, the doors.
Next slide, please, Kelly.
Okay, there you go.
There it is. That is El Castillo, right?
Yeah, El Castillo on the left, and then the observatory, or El Caracol, as we call it in Spanish, on the right side. It's a round building, and it was discovered by the archaeologists, and it looked like they call it a birthday cake originally. And then they studied all the openings, like here and here, and they coincide with the Venus declinations, and also the sun, mainly the sun. This is the western side, and the sun rays enter this corner of the door and come out in the northern part. That is a unique phenomenon, and it was planned that way. And the same thing, the reverse, which coincides with the solstices. So basically, here's the solstices, and in this building we have the equinoxes reflected on the northern balustrade, basically the balustrade in the northern part of the building. And twice a year on the equinoxes we have this. In September is unlikely to be seen, but in March 21st and 22nd, they're visible a few days before and a few days after. So astronomy is related to both buildings, plus other buildings as well. But these are the most remarkable ones.
Right. And right now, El Castillo, that you see on the left, is one of the 7 wonders of the world. So it's a very, very special place. And the area, the whole archaeological area of Chichen Itza is just enormous and is really impressive. So that's one thing to look forward to. Then from there, we go to the Ekbalam, and with an opportunity to go swimming in a cenote, which are these sinkholes that are all over the Yucatan Peninsula. And it's really a wonderful experience. It's a fresh water, it's clear water, very refreshing, it's so unique. So we'll very much encourage everyone to really just dig in, go in there and take a swim. It's a great experience. From there, we go, next slide, we go to Mérida, which is the capital of the state of the Yucatan, or the Yucatan Peninsula. And it's quite a charming, a slow-paced town. It's great to walk around. It has plazas and the colonial feel to it, the great food, some great avenues with some of the mansions from the time of the Sisal plant, which is the Nequén, from this very wealthy families that made a lot of money out of that plant to make the ropes for the ships. So you can see some of these mansions from the 1800s, but it's a great town to just be and enjoy what Mexico has to offer and eat some great food. And in there is where we're going to see the museum, El Mundo Maya Museum, which is a new museum that with a wealth of information regarding not only the Maya, but also about the impact of the meteorite that pretty much destroyed the dinosaur. But we'll have Kelly talk about that. So from there, can we get the next slide? We go to this is my personal favorites archaeological site is Uxmal. And Uxmal is very elegant. It's lovely. And you go there and you stare at these buildings and you just admire the work of the design that goes on all these walls, and it's just magical to me. And then on the left, Alfonso, please correct me, is that the Pirámide
del Divino
magician?
Yeah,
Del Aladino
building, yeah.
Yeah.
This one,
and can you talk a little bit about Uxmal? Just a few little comments.
Yeah. Well, this building is very interesting because it's got about 5 different stages of construction. This is, for example, is temple number 3, this one that is facing west. And then there's a huge staircase facing east, which is one of the steepest and a very small tiny little steps. They don't allow people to climb up. But the architecture here, for example, is a variation. This is a Chene style architecture. And then this side of the balustrade is decorated with chac masks. Chacs appear everywhere. This is another set of chac masks here. And then this is inside of the nunnery quadrangle. The Spaniards called it nunnery. And that's what it stuck with. This name is just a nickname. Here's the Venus symbol decorating the facade of the lower building. This is, we're facing north. That is the northern part of the quadrangle. And this is another picture of the same quadrangle, just showing us a corner where usually are the chac masks.
Yeah. And the astronomy details are always present in all these archaeology sites. And of course, we don't want to go up those steps because just to think about it, it makes me dizzy. But one thing I have to mention from my own personal experience is that the pictures never give it justice to the impact that some of these archaeology sites can have on a person. So this is just a little sample of what is to be seen at Uxmal and at Chichen Itza, for example. But again, you know, I'm partial to Uxmal myself. So what else are we going to see? After that, we see, and that's another lovely archaeological site, is Kaba. And as you can see, that wall in there, all the different carvings, is just a little bit of a different style. That is the Puc style. Please, Alfonso, correct me. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The
That's
Puc
correct.
style. And again, you know, it's when you see this type of detail and this whole walls adorned with this type of design and architecture. Anything about the Puc region, Alfonso, that we can know a little bit how it differentiates?
Yeah, well, one of the things at this area is that there are no rivers and there are no cenotes because we are farther south in the peninsula, so cenotes are not found in this area. So one of the things that the Mayas of these both cities, Uxmal and Kaba, they managed to create sinkholes, not sinkholes, but they are cisterns. And those cisterns were filled during the rainy season and basically provided drinking and water enough water to use to live, because without water you cannot survive. So they managed the water in such a manner that they survived for long periods of time without rain. So each of the buildings was basically a basin, a catch basin. So they design drainage systems to fill those containers that are called chultun in Maya. So this is just one of the little details about this area.
Yeah, very interesting. And I have to say that our friend Alfonso speaks Maya as well, right, Alfonso?
That's correct.
Yeah.
I learned Maya as a child in my village. I was born in a village near Merida, so I managed to pick up the language. I don't speak it, so let's say it's difficult to be fluent. I'm fluent, but I'm not so educated in the Maya language as in Spanish, because I went to school and only in Spanish. So,
but enough to get along if you need to, which is important.
I can insult you in Maya.
Okay, next slide, please. So we finally make our way to Campeche, that is on the Gulf of Mexico, and it's a fortified city that, you know, to protect in the times of the Spaniards, to protect against the attacks of the pirates. And, you know, at that time, that's, you know, so we have all these stories about pirates as well in the middle of all our discoveries of archaeology, of music, of the flavors of our food, of astronomy. Now we're going to also learn about pirates. So it is here that is our base for our eclipse. Right. And we are staying at this is the Etna, one of the
I'm sorry.
archaeological sites nearby. So we want to talk a little bit about the eclipse.
Yes, okay.
Ellie.
And so we're actually well along in our tour before the eclipse happens, and we'll be, as you'll see in just a moment, at a beautiful hacienda. You know, it will be mid-October, on October 14th, when this happens, and the weather in this part of the world is still warm and humid and kind of tropical, but it will be pleasant. And one of the reasons we chose the site we did was to make sure that we had creature comforts nearby, the ability to get out of the sun and into your rooms. This will be a fairly long annular eclipse. You can see the key times there are from C2 to C3, and that's about 4.5 minutes when the moon will be completely immersed on the sun's disk. This is an annular eclipse, not a total eclipse, for those who might not know, because the moon is a little bit farther away than average in its orbit, and so it's not quite big enough, or appears to be not quite big enough, to completely cover the sun's disk. So annular eclipses are exciting to see. This is from last year, a sequence that I didn't take, but was on a Sky and Telescope chartered jet. And so we're looking forward to seeing this. It will be a wonderful addition to the rest of what is going on.
And these are some pictures of the accommodations. This is our meeting point in Cancun, the Marriott Courtyard Hotel. And and this is, of course, Alfonso, this is the Hotel Maya Land.
Yeah.
Maya Land, and that's one of the actual views that you can see. You can see the pyramid of the observatory,
right, right here.
Caracol.
It has the advantage that staying in this hotel, that you can be away from the crowds and be before they get admitted and see the ruins, you know, very peacefully, and get the great commentary from our guides and hear everything and see everything. So that's why we selected this hotel that is really on site of the ruins.
Yes, it is on site. You can actually see the ruins when you walk around the gardens there, and they're extensive gardens. And then you go and see the Chichen Itza archaeological site during the cool part of the day. So that is really a real advantage. But it's lovely. And this is our hotel in Merida. That is the Hilton. Lovely place. It used to be a mansion, right, Alfonso?
Yeah, it used to be a private home, and they transformed it into a hotel.
It was some home.
Yeah.
Well, they actually left a little bit of the original. The lobby has a little bit, but then they just built everything new around it.
But the lobby is charming. You go in and it's just like a mansion, but not like a really dreary or old feeling, but it's light and welcoming, and a lot of sunshine. So that's really, really important. And finally, here is our Hacienda Guayamón. So one of the luxury collection haciendas from the luxury collection hotels. So one of the best accommodations.
This hacienda has quite a history. Originally, the hacienda was established in the 16th century, while we were still in North America with just forts and wooden structures. Mexico was far advanced. They had cathedrals that they were building. And so this hacienda, well, the actual structures were built in the 1700s. And the hacienda was built to turn hemp and sisal into twine, sort of the lithium batteries of that day. Because if you've ever been on a historic sailing ship, you can look and you'll see all the lines that go to all the sails. And that was multiplied by all the trade that went around the world. So these haciendas were in their heyday was in the 1700s and the 1800s. Of course, when the steamships came along, that put them out of business. But this hacienda, the chief owner in the 1800s was Rafael Carajal Iturralde, and his initials are HCI are carved into the walls, so you can still see this. Now the hacienda went into a little bit of a ruin and was reestablished. This is the swimming pool you see, and that is where the factory was. But they've left the columns in the pool, which I think is a nice architectural feature. But that was where the workers would make this twine. And then there's also a cathedral, not a cathedral, a small church that doesn't have a roof, and it's still used for weddings today. So they've left part of it in not disrepair, but intentionally, so you can see how it was historically. The gardens are absolutely lovely throughout the place. You can see how large the trees are from the age of this beautiful place, but you will be staying in luxury. You'll have air conditioning, and everything has been remodeled to up-to-date standards. So this is one of the most lovely hotels in the area, or I think the best hotel in the area.
Yeah, and it's restored. A lot of the things have been purposely left to be more authentic, but of course the rooms and the bathrooms are all with the modern conveniences, with beautiful bathrooms, everything works. So it's been restored and modernized whenever it's necessary. So this is the place where we will be watching the annular eclipse, and of course we'll have some
and the cuisine
lunch on the outdoors.
The
outside.
cuisine is great, with the limes and the mangoes and all those sauces that the chefs can make for you. So you will be delighted, and a good place if it gets too hot to freshen up for this annular eclipse.
Right. Well, John and Rita and Alfonso, thank you very much. We're going to shift gears now and turn the podium, as it were, over to Dr. Gabrielle Vale from the University of North Carolina, who's going to give us a little background on the how the Maya became such expert sky watchers. Gabby, please go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. If you would go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Centuries of sky watching in the Maya area and other parts of what we call Mesoamerica, and that's the area that you see here on the map. The blue section is the Maya region, and we see other Mesoamerican cultures represented as well. This led to the extremely sophisticated prediction mechanisms and the development of an elaborate system of interlocking calendars. So these would include a 260-day ritual calendar that was used for prognostication and scheduling, a 365-day solar calendar, a 177-day lunar calendar used to predict eclipses, and a Venus calendar of 2,920 days. The sites aren't located exactly on the map, but you'll see in the northern region the site of Chichen Itza and the Castillo that we just saw. Moving further south, I'll be talking about the site of Xoltun and astronomical discoveries made there. And then in the lower right-hand corner, the site of Quirigua in southern Guatemala, which has stone monuments highlighting celestial events. I'm also going to conclude our virtual tour at the Aztec site, the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. Next slide, please. In addition to the cycles that I just mentioned, the Maya also used a calendar that was based in absolute time. Called the long count, it allowed celestial observations to be tracked and the information recorded using a hieroglyphic writing system. And the text that you see represented on the right is from a stela, a stone monument from the site of Quirigua. And that's important because it records the starting date of the Maya era in 3114 BCE, which corresponded in the Maya system to a date 130000. This is based on a system of numeration that included units of 20, starting with a kin, which is a day, and moving upward from there. The only place it deviated was the third position. Rather than 400 days, it was 360 days to approximate the length of the year. Next slide, please. Decipherment of Maya hieroglyphic texts and more precise methods of mapping and measuring alignments at archaeological sites provide a window into the astronomical knowledge, beliefs, and practices of pre-Hispanic Maya cultures in the 5th through 15th centuries. And here I just wanted to point out a couple of examples. So you see texts on stone, carved on stone monuments, stone lintels above doorways, like the example at the top from Las Monjas at Chichen Itza. This is an astronomical text that hopefully you'll have a chance to see if you visit the site. You'll also be going to Ekbalam, and the painted text on your lower right is a capstone. So it would have capped the room in the Acropolis structure at the building. And this shows a deity representing one of the rulers of the site. We also here see two examples of codices, painted screenfold books, which include astronomical content, such as the eclipse scene that we see in that middle picture. And I'll be coming back to this in just a moment to give you some further information. Next slide. One of the primary mediums for recording hieroglyphic text was stone monuments, like this example from Quirigua, which you see portrays the king in a ceremony of regalia. And then the side and two sides and back would have had a text. And this particular text, as I mentioned, highlights that creation date in 3114 BCE. The text itself talks about the setting of 3 stones in the sky by primordial deities. And these were arranged in a triangular configuration that we see highlighted in that text over to the right. You have the 3 stones there. The evidence that we've been able to compile confirms that these mark the boundaries of the Orion Nebula. They were erected by the celestial deities as a hearth, and the nebula itself is seen as a fire burning within that hearth. So when you go out and look at the night sky, think about those hearthstones in the nebula. And indeed, for a number of centuries, Maya women, when they made their hearths, set up their kitchens, they configured their hearthstones in this particular pattern to commemorate the acts performed by the gods at creation. Next slide. Several years ago, excavations in an unassuming mound at the site of Choltun in the Petén region of Guatemala, the one I showed on the map earlier, revealed stuccoed walls painted with astronomical texts, suggesting that this was a scribal workshop. And this was really exciting to those of us who work with the screenfold books because it included texts very similar to what we have in those codices. One of the texts included a lunar table, and another one that you see on the right side of the page here, I've highlighted in red, actually refers to that hearthstone constellation, the 3 stones. So it was commemorated in a number of different places. It's likely that texts painted on the walls of structures such as this one were later transferred into books to preserve them and to disseminate the information. And if you want to go to the next slide. Screenfold books called codices are especially important in our understanding of celestial knowledge in the Maya region. One of the 4 extant codices, known as the Codice Maya de Mexico, is a Venus almanac highlighting the 4 stations of the planet. And this was conceptualized as a series of deities. Of primary importance for pre-Hispanic Maya was Venus in its morning star aspect, when it rose ahead of the sun in the sky for the first time after its period of invisibility. And for Maya cultures at the time, this period of invisibility was envisioned as Venus being in the underworld region, the place of rebirth and regeneration. I want to move to the next slide, please. So here you can see where the Codice Maya de Mexico was purportedly found in a cave in Chiapas, Mexico. And this is the only one of the 4 extant codices was actually found in situ in the Maya region. The other 3, the Paris, Dresden, and Madrid, which were likely painted in the northern Maya lowlands, were likely confiscated during the colonial period and made their way to Europe. We don't really have any documentation as to how that occurred. Although we don't know.
Gabby, surely there were more than 4 codices. What happened to all the others?
So the others were confiscated. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that. The others were confiscated. A number of them burned, some of them most likely hidden. They were still being used in the colonial period. They were being confiscated for well over 100 years after the conquest. Some of them probably made their way into caves like this Codice Maya de Mexico, where they may have disintegrated. Frequently, the Spanish learned about ceremonies that were being taken place underground. So literally they went underground with this information. And this knowledge was passed on in other forms. The Spanish introduced the use of the Latin alphabet. So the scribes then continued to include this information in written form, just in a different kind of written form. And the Spanish didn't really know what was going on under their noses at the time. So a lot of the information was retained. It's in very metaphorical language, so you wouldn't know just from reading it what it was about. Yeah. So if you go to the next slide. So we don't know what may have been lost in these probably hundreds of codices that were destroyed by the Spaniards, but the ones left to us do reveal a lot about what pre-Hispanic Maya cultures were interested in tracking. So the Dresden and Paris codices include a recyclable Venus calendar that was accurate to 1 day in 500 years, an eclipse warning table made in the 8th century that still functions today to make predictions, a zodiacal table in the Paris Codex, which was based on their 13 constellations, a table to track Mars's retrograde motion, and a seasonal table that highlighted the solstices and equinoxes. The next slide. Of special interest is the table for tracking the 4 stations of Venus, with emphasis on its heliacal rise from the Dresden Codex. And here we see the 5 pages of the table, or the 6 pages, I should say. The first one being an introduction that lets you into the table and gives you the entry dates, which were in the 10th, 12th, and 13th centuries. We know that these tables were actually originally composed in the 8th, 9th centuries, and they were copied and recopied into later documents until they made their way into these particular codices. Now, if we go to the next page, we can see that what's highlighted in this table is the morning star aspect of Venus. When Venus rises after being in the underworld, fashioning its darts, and then rises ahead of the sun with its spear thrower and spears or darts the various deities and animals that are depicted in the lower register. So these represent things like sustenance, royal power, and maize. So Venus at this time was considered extremely dangerous. Now, it's significant that there are 5 different warrior aspects signifying Venus's heliacal rise. This is based on observations of the path of Venus, seen on the next slide, that it traces as a morning star during its approximately 263 days in the sky. So you'll note that we have these nice graphs showing these different patterns, which is how we as Westerners think about the path in the sky. But if you look, these correspond to these 5 different deities, these different manifestations of the morning star, which is how the pre-Hispanic Maya conceptualized Venus. The Dresden table also equates 5 different Venus years of 584 days, represented by the 5 pages of the table, with 8 years in their 365-day calendar. And incidentally, they were very well aware that the solar year was longer than 365 days. They didn't use fractions, however, so they had to have these corrections incorporated into the tables in order to keep the solar year in sync with a 365-day year. So next page. So if you travel to Chichen Itza, if you go on the tour, you will see a building called the Venus Platform, which includes references to this synchronization between the Venus cycle and the solar cycle. We see on the left side in that lower right corner, a Venus glyph paired with a bar that represents the number 5. So 5 Venus periods. And then we have a glyph representing the completion of the year, the 365-day year, paired with 8 dots representing the 8 years. So this shows the synchronization of the 2 cycles, which was something that was extremely important to the Maya, showing how different cycles came together. And it's something they recorded both in the architecture and in their screenfold books. Next slide. Another important almanac from the Dresden Codex was used to predict eclipses. This was initially devised to be used during the 8th century and was updated to be relevant into the 18th century, and indeed continues to accurately predict eclipses into this century. If you go to the next slide, this is an 8-page table, and we see both representations of eclipses in the imagery and also references in the hieroglyphic captions. And you'll see one of the images, or two of them, show this open-mouthed serpent who's about to devour this symbol that represents Keen, or the sun. So this is probably the feathered serpent Venus, who's about to swallow the sun. And this is also described in the hieroglyphic caption as Venus at its point of descending. So as evening star, probably its last appearance as evening star. And then there are a series of negative prognostications associated with this event. It ends, I really love this, with a reference to Keen Sabak, or the sun is covered with soot. And this is how the eclipse itself is described, very metaphorical. Next slide. So what was the importance of sky watching in Mesoamerica? It helped to ensure survival through extensive knowledge of natural cycles, when to plant, when to harvest, when the rains arrive, and so forth. And also, as I mentioned, it warned of events that were considered dangerous: solar eclipses and Venus's first appearance as evening star. And we know that it was performed locally at hundreds of different sites, and information was shared through codices by priests and astronomers. Next slide. And finally, as we were talking about before, this knowledge is also mapped into the terrestrial world, and buildings are aligned to different orientations. So we see that with the Caracol, the observatory at Chichen Itza, with various alignments to Venus extremes, summer solstices, winter solstices. And also, if you look at the Temple Mayor with its twin towers, one devoted to the god of rain, the other to the god of sun. This was established and built so that the sun, the equinox sun, would rise between the two towers. So we see this as a prevalent pattern, not just in the Maya area, but throughout Mesoamerica. And then my final slide. To wrap up this brief overview, I just wanted to provide, for those of you who might be interested, some suggestions for further readings and give you my email address. You're welcome to contact me with questions. And at the very bottom, you'll see a reference to my database of the Maya codices. This allows you to explore the hieroglyphic, calendrical, and astronomical content of these 4 surviving Maya codices.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's so great to provide your contact. Thank you so much. That's great.
And
You're welcome. I'd be happy to talk more about this. As Kelly knows, I had so much more information I wanted to
Oh my God!
on.
When I was in studying high school, I don't know, maybe middle school, I remember studying about the codices, and then the one in Madrid, the Paris, and the Dresden, and it's so great to hear you talking about those. They're just fabulous documents too that still survive. They're still with us.
And I'll just mention, because I was talking about the Codice Maya de Mexico, it's actually traveling from Mexico to the Getty Museum in LA. It's going to be on exhibit there for 3 months. And there's going to be a symposium on November 5th, I believe, that I've been invited to speak at. So if any of you live in the LA area or in California, it would be well worth seeing. It's just
Great
so
to know.
incredible to see these painted texts.
When is it happening?
It's
Gabby?
opening October 18th, and it goes through January 15th or 16th.
Fabulous.
fabulous.
I'm tempted.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vale. Such a great introduction to what awaits us down there on the Yucatan. So I'm going to take over now. And one of the things that in the last 20 years or so has become really associated with the Yucatan Peninsula is the demise of the dinosaurs, because the big one hit there roughly 65 million years ago and created chaos all around the Earth. Now, I'm going to be accompanying the tour, and I will give a much longer presentation, but I just wanted to give you a taste of what this is all about. It was in the 1980s and 90s that a team of scientists led by the Alvarez, Dr. Louis and Walter Alvarez, discovered that there was a layer of clay worldwide that marked the boundary between what we called the Cretaceous and at that time the Tertiary. It's now called the Paleogene epochs. This is about 65 million years ago. And in sampling that, they discovered that the amount of iridium, the element iridium, was vastly higher than anywhere else on Earth. And this implied that there was some sort of catastrophic collision with an extraterrestrial object that had delivered all this iridium and spread it worldwide. It had to have been powerful enough to do that. We see a lot of iridium in meteorites, for example. So the idea started that there must be a crater, a very large crater somewhere on the Earth to explain all this iridium. In addition, certain geologic sites along this boundary discovered grains of quartz that had been shocked by powerful shock waves. So all of this was arguing for a big impact somewhere. And after 10 years of search, and it was a really kind of a very competitive thing among geologists worldwide, by accident, a geologist hired by Pemex, the Mexican petroleum company, was doing flights over the Yucatan Peninsula and the Gulf of Mexico in a plane, mapping the magnetic fields in the ground below. And as you can see there on the left, his maps led to the discovery of a multiple ring circular basin centered on a little tiny town on the coast called Chicxulub Puerto. And it's not visible today as a crater. It's buried under sediment, but the magnetic fields did not lie. And they suggested that there was this massive crater, enormously large. And the thing to remember about this is that in that time period, 65 million years ago, the Yucatan Peninsula as we know it today didn't exist. It was a shelf, shallow buried shelf of carbonates. Carbonates are very rich in calcium and sulfur and other things. And so in a way, the fact that the impact took place in that carbonate shelf was a very bad day for Earth, because all of that carbon dioxide and sulfur got distributed in the atmosphere. And not only was there a huge crater left behind that decimated whatever ecology existed on the Yucatan Peninsula, but it spread worldwide. It was a huge impact, one of the largest in Earth's modern history. Roughly 70% of all species died as a result of that impact. So this is an artist's portrayal of what that impact might have looked like. The object was roughly 6 to 8 miles across, maybe 10 or 12 kilometers. Debate still rages whether it was an asteroid or a comet, probably an asteroid because of all the iridium in it. And what was left behind is this multiple ring crater, which doesn't exist on the surface today. It's all been covered over subsequently by marine deposits. But the one vestige on the surface of this crater are these cenotes, these little blue circles that you see here. This whole area is limestone, and limestone is easily eroded, dissolved by water flowing through it. The underground water was sort of diverted around the crater as it was flowing in the subterranean aquifer, and it created these erosional spots, these cenotes that exist today, and there's a very distinct ring of them surrounding the center of the crater. Now, I'll tell much more about that once we get down there. There's so much to this story that is just amazing, and luck and all the research that's been done since then to understand this crater and the impact that it had on the Earth. But that's all I'm going to say for now, just to whet your appetite. I did want to go back to our eclipse just for a second. This is a plot across the Gulf of Mexico, starting at Corpus Christi down here at the lower left, all the way across the Gulf of Mexico to Campeche, and then across the rest of Central America. This is a plot of the likelihood of clouds on the day of the eclipse for mid-October, based on statistical data. And I want you to notice that, at least as far as this area is concerned, we here in Campeche, near Campeche, are in a pretty good spot. We have at least a 50-50 chance of having a clear sky that day. And we hope, obviously, you can never tell from these statistics what's actually going to happen. But the tendency of the clouds in that area are to be clear in the morning, and then because it's a bubbling tropical moist air mass, over the course of the afternoon, cumulus clouds tend to develop more intensely inland and not so much at the coast. So the fact that we're near the coast of Campeche is a good thing. And the other thing I know that is on your minds is that we're coming here to the tail end of the hurricane season. And I want you to know that historically, there are very few hurricanes or even tropical storms that cross the Yucatan Peninsula at this time of year. I won't get into this too much, but there've been in the last 150 years, roughly, there have been only 3 major hurricanes to cross the Yucatan Peninsula, and you can see the likelihood of even a tropical storm is pretty low compared to the peak of the hurricane season, which is largely past by this time of the year. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the clouds look like in the days ahead, because our tour begins one day from tomorrow. We have 1 year until we get to experience all of this wonderful architecture and history and cultural immersion, and an annular solar eclipse also. It's just a unique tour that I hope you'll participate in. And although I haven't really talked this over with Alonso yet, I hope we can make a little detour to Chicxulub, which is a quiet little sleeping village on the coast. And this is where we're going to take our group picture, the I Love Chicxulub sign there on the coast. And so with that, I want to thank
there's one little thing. They recently, in August, they opened a new museum in Progreso, which is straight north from Merida.
Nearby.
And
Right.
that's basically a meteorite museum.
That's great. That's great. And you might think that there must be meteorites from this impact object all over the earth, and in fact, that's not the case. It's the explosion was so powerful that it just obliterated not only the ground that it hit, but the meteorite itself. There was no actual samples of it, only these grains of shocked quartz and the iridium spike in the deposit. Well, so this is about it for us today. I know we have a couple of questions here, and I want to get to them, but I want to remind you all that we are hoping to encourage you to come and join us on this amazing adventure. You can find out more information here at skyandtelescope.org/Yucatan 2023. And I will be posting this video on Sky and Telescope's YouTube channel so that you can go back and review it or tell all your friends about it, and hopefully get everybody to join us on this. And I do see one question here. Will there be a solar telescope to watch the eclipse? Absolutely. I always bring a small telescope with me that will allow us to have magnified views of the sun. You're of course encouraged to do that yourself. I want to point out that this is limited to 20 people. We're going to be a very intimate group, half a busload. And so this is not like many tours that perhaps you've taken where you have, busload after busload. We're going to be a very stealthy kind of small group. We'll get to know each other very, very well. And I always bring a telescope, but I will say that for an annular eclipse, probably your best bet is to make sure that you bring some binoculars along with you, and we'll be supplying filters so that you can watch the sun safely during that. And I'm encouraging anybody else that has a question to pop one in the Q&A box. Do Rita, John, Alonso, Dr. Vale, any of you have things you want to add while we're sort of wrapping up here?
Well, very little was mentioned about Coba, which we're going to be in the beginning of the tour. And it's an amazing site, huge site with a number of Sacbeop, and also is classic time. There's a lot of classic elements as well as post-classic period architecture.
When you say post-classic period, I don't think this was mentioned. What is the time, the frame of the peak of Maya culture? When did it begin? Was it at its greatest, and where does it stand today?
Well, Coba is around 600 and 700 AD. A lot of the stelas, which are monoliths that have records on them, written on them. And they have been sort of deciphered, some of them. They have found rulers and everything, and that's during the classic period. And also it existed and prolonged its existence until about 900 AD. So we're talking about from 900 AD is when the post-classic starts, or it's basically the apogee of the Mayas around 600 to 700 AD during the classic time.
Thank you. Thank you. And I've changed my name tag there so you can see my email address, kbd@skyandtelescope.org, if you have any questions. And unless anyone else has a question they'd like to just throw out here at the very last minute, I will thank John and Rita and Alfonso and Dr. Vale, Dr. Gabrielle Vale, for bringing us such an amazing taste of what awaits us down in the Yucatan. I can't wait to go down there. I've never been to this area of the world before. There is so much I want to see and do while I'm down there. And I hope that some of you who are on this webinar today will be joining us. So on behalf of the rest of us, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you on our tour. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.